Welcome to the Awakened Goddess Show, your source for inspiration, wisdom, and personal discovery. The place to learn from a diverse mix of mentors, metaphysical experts, spiritual leaders, and best-selling authors from around the world. I'm your host, Angela Wilkinson. Join me as I explore the minds of my masterful guests while they share powerful insights and easy-to-use tools you can start using right away. Now, let's tap into the energy of the Awakened Goddess and be enlightened by today's guest. Lindsay Maxfield is a psychic, intuitive, and energy healer, helping clients heal from pain and suffering by teaching them to decode and release their emotions and break emotional patterns that have been passed down through generations. Lindsay experienced the full force of negative emotions at an early age, beginning a battle with depression and mental illness at just 9 years old. After suffering a nervous breakdown at 21 and receiving a diagnosis of bipolar disorder at age 22, she vowed to break the cycle once and for all and find a way to cure this incurable mental illness. And she did. Lindsay has made it her life's work to teach the spiritual truths of our emotions and help others find a path to true and lasting peace. As a psychic, intuitive, and medium, she can see the truth about a client's emotions and deliver the message, and as a healer, she can lovingly set them free, healing her clients and generations before and after in one fell swoop. Now let's welcome Lindsay to the show. Hi, I'm Angela Wilkinson, and welcome to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show, where we co-create powerful, conscious conversations on the leading edge. Today I have Lindsay joining us, and I know she is a longtime fan of the show, so I'm really excited to have her here for that reason. But also, we're going to be talking about the true purpose of our emotions, how we have a tendency to bring the emotions of our ancestors into our own lives, and also how to heal them. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Angela. So great to be here. I'm so excited.
Yay. Okay, so let's start with your backstory, how you got to this place. You have lots of rich development or things that have unfolded in your life that has brought you to where you are now. So let's start with that.
Sure. My story begins an eon ago. It really begins in childhood. I almost inexplicably began suffering from depression at age 9. I was in the 4th grade, and I was always a very bright, happy, high energy, bubbly kind of girl. But suddenly it was like the switch just flipped, and I was completely different almost overnight. I had a hard time getting out of bed. Where before I was very social, very outgoing. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to everyone. It was a very dark place, especially for a child, and for it to be so sudden. And it took a long time to get through that. It was sort of just a slow process of walking out, and things got better. But that really set the pattern in my life, not only of episodes of depression, but the cycling, the up and down and the back and forth. And things, again, when I was about 12 or 13, I had my next depressive episode, and it was very dark. And it took me probably a year to get through it. And it was just, like I said, a really slow climb back up. And so every time I would get up, I'd get sort of back to normal, and then I'd keep going up. And I would be more social and more outgoing and more talkative, and I would compete in pageants. And I was on the high school tennis team and debate team and literary and all these things. And but then again, inevitably, I would crash down again, and the highs would get higher and the lows would get lower. And things really came to a head in college when highs were definitely the highest, and I sort of knew intellectually, this is a bit odd. This doesn't seem normal, but it's like I told myself that after so many years of depression and so much determination to get out of it, that the highs were my reward. Every time I'd come up, I thought, I finally beat this thing. And it was like penance. Like I paid my price. I went through the horribleness. I stuck through it, and I'm out, and it's great and it's awesome. And so I just rode those highs. But the energy of that, you really just can't sustain that. And inevitably, again, I crashed, and that was the worst by far. And I suffered a nervous breakdown. I had to drop out of school. I was my senior year of college, but I had to drop out. I had to move home. I pretty much lost everything. I was just completely wiped out by that. And I thought that was my rock bottom moment, but actually a few months later, when I was formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder, was a definite that was it. That was the bottom, because it's a definition. The
Mm-hmm.
doctor
Yeah.
said that's incurable and that is who you are. And now you will have to live with this for the rest of your life. You may have a job, you may not. You probably won't get married. You probably shouldn't have kids. All these things that we hope for in our lives. I was just told, like, forget about it. Sorry, you're crazy. And that's devastating. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, when you get a diagnosis, you think, okay, now I know what to do and we can work through this. But that's not how it is with mental illness. They just label you and you're like, is this it? Is that it? Is that all I have to hope for? And I'm stubborn enough that I said no to this. And I really almost rebelled against the diagnosis. And yes, I took the meds and we tried to find the right ones because I needed that stability that they brought. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that this isn't who I am. This is a thing that comes to me on occasion, but I don't want this to be who I am. I don't want this to dictate my life, and I certainly don't want it to tell me what I can achieve or who I can be. And so began this pattern of really discovering, why do I have this thing? I don't believe that anything in life is an accident, and I don't believe in a kind of God who sends us here to punish us just to laugh while we struggle. I didn't believe that. And so I decided that if I'm going to get through this, if I'm going to find a better way, I need to find the reason for these depressions. What is the message they're bringing me? Why do I have them? There has to be a purpose. And that sent me on this wild and crazy journey that took me where I am today.
Mm. Wow. So what was the first catalyst? You had gotten the diagnosis and then you kind of went on this as you say, rebellious journey against the diagnosis. So what was like the next catalyst that created, like, how did you connect with your spirituality and then your gifts?
There has always been a tension in my spirituality. I was raised in a Christian religion and I loved it and I believed in it, but there was the fighting against, like, okay, God, you made me this way, but you need to tell me, and you're not telling me. I'm here, I'm listening, I'm waiting. So there was a lot of tension in that path. The first thing that really kicked things off, taking me from the angry rebellious phase to, like, okay, I'm here now, what am I going to do about it and how I'm going to learn, is I actually met somebody, and he, against all odds, it was a crazy story, but we met and we fell in love. This was about a year after the diagnosis, so it was much more stable. And I was crying to him one night, just complaining about, I have this thing and I don't want this thing. I know that I'm made for so much more, but I can't find it, and it's crying about everything I had to give up. And he said to me that, have you ever thought that maybe your illness isn't a curse, but it's in fact a gift? Because
Mm-hmm.
look at all the ways that it did reroute your life, and look at all the things that it brought you to. And he said, and it brought you to me. And it was very prophetic, because we ended up getting married and we're having our 10th anniversary this year. So of course
Yeah.
it was this wonderful thing to meet this man who's just the light of my life. But so that was the very first thing, is to say, okay, I have this thing and it feels like a curse. There must be some magical gift in this. There must be, because why else is it such a constant part of my life? There must be something in here that I need to learn from. And so I began to start listening to my emotions. There's the tendency in all of us, but especially in the mental health community, that you have these negative emotions. Let's get rid of them. Let's eradicate them, whatever you got to do, because they're not healthy and they're not good. Well, I definitely agree that they're not healthy to stay, but there's a reason and
Mm-hmm.
there's a purpose, and they're not gonna go away until you listen. This is the problem. The more that you try to run away from them, they're not done. They're not done with you. They have a message. They need to tell you something. And so until you sit and listen and take that message, they're going to ramp up in intensity. They're going to keep going. They're going to attract more experiences and more people to you that match that vibration, because they're trying to get your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I went within, that was the very first step, is going within and saying, what can I learn from this? Tell me what you have to teach me. And that mindset of going inward and being open to spiritual guidance opened up this whole path of spiritual development and allowed me to discover these spiritual gifts. I had no idea I had them. I still am in the process of, okay, well, I have this thing, and now how can I use it? Because they're still developing and still growing and very surprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Because I know that there was a particular guest on the show that was a strong catalyst for you. And so I would
Yes.
love to share, how did you first learn about the show? And then what was your experience from watching the show?
I was introduced to the show probably because I was introduced to you. I did B school last year to turn this vague ambition of I want to help people through their emotions. I want to take this ambition and turn it into a business. I want to formally do this. Let's figure out how to turn this into something that can help people. So I did B school last year, and through the B school community, I met you and a bunch of marvelous, fantastic, the best people in the world.
Right.
And so, people post their offerings and they share. And so I saw the Awakened Goddess show and immediately became such a fan because I found my intuition was really speaking to me through the show. There would be certain guests that, all of them, I read this, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so great. I can't wait. Some of them, though, I'm like, no, today, right now, stop what you're doing, go watch the show. And others, I'll get to it later and they're great. But those ones that are just like, now you have to do this, there's a message specifically for me. And one, I think the one you're talking about in particular was Kimi, who was on last fall, maybe summer. I don't know. Anyway, her story is pretty incredible. And she's very powerful in what she does. And me, I consider myself such a novice. I was aspiring to have maybe psychic gifts. That would be so cool, wouldn't it? But then when I watched the show and I heard her talk about her experience was sort of sudden and dramatic. But as she talked about these little things that she would do or little things that they would develop, it was this huge moment of like, holy crap, I'm doing that. Mm-hmm. Holy cow, I have so many of the same gifts that she's talking about. And it was like hearing her talk about them gave me permission. Well, it helped me recognize them in myself, but then it gave me permission to take it out of this realm of, oh, I'm not a psychic who predicts the future. I don't talk to dead people. I must not be psychic. It allowed me to see all the ways that my spiritual gifts are there, they're developed, they're ready, and it's okay to use them. And not only that, but when you start using them, the people come to you who need those gifts the most. Right. And so that gave me, it was like, okay, you know what? Yes, I'm an energy healer, but it's time now to acknowledge the fact that spirit is with me when I work. Spirit speaks through me when I work. And these ways that I feel suddenly guided to heal my clients are being fed to me. There are spirits in the room with me that are telling me what to do and telling me exactly what that person needs. And so hearing that in another person allowed me to recognize it in myself and to just run with it.
Yeah. And I love that because you contacted me right after that show and I could feel just how impactful that was. And that's one of the things with the show that I'm always looking to create an experience for the viewers and listeners. And because we all learn from each other's stories and we can see ourselves in other people, and it helps us. Right. I think it helps bridge that idea that, like what you were saying about, oh, I'm an aspiring, wanting to do this, to, okay, here's someone that's doing it, and oh, wait, I'm already doing some of that stuff. Yeah. And so I loved how that was like this awakening for you to recognize and have that reflection that you were able to see so clearly, and how that's really helped you unfold what was next for you.
Right. And that's been the thing about psychic development, is that you're just looking for guideposts. It's all this sort of hazy, we're moving on a feeling, but we've been taught to distrust our feelings in this society, especially when you have a history of mental illness. Don't trust it, medicate it away. And that is the opposite of spiritual development. You're dropped these little breadcrumbs, and you need to slowly and with trust follow them. But you're essentially walking around in the dark. So when you find someone or something, a book, or you come across a podcast or something that reflects your experience, it turns the light on. And suddenly like, it is a thing. This is real. I am walking toward the right place. And your show has been that. Not only that I've seen myself reflected in some of your guests, but I'll hear, even if it's just an offhanded phrase they make, it's another breadcrumb. It's another piece of the puzzle that to me just says, oh yeah, that's it. And I can just pick it up and go with it from there.
Yeah. I know, it's so fun to just have those little signs. And as you said, the more you open yourself up to it, and when you start acknowledging, oh, and you have kind of like a placeholder inside that, ooh, that resonates. And then once you know what that feels like, it's like it helps you move faster and faster along that path. Because it seems like from that point forward, things have really catapulted for you.
Yes. Yes, it was crazy. That was the first time I allowed myself to see myself as a healer. Before I put all the emphasis on the tools, and I was in this place of like, well, should I get certified in this? Well, what if that's not the right one? And I need to find the best modality because I put all the faith in the tool.
Mm-hmm.
That's not where healing is. Healing's not in a tool, and healing is not even in the healer. In my belief system, healing all comes from God, whether you want to call it source or the universe, or it's this thing bigger than ourselves, the thing that suffuses us with life. And when we tune back into that energy, that's what provides the healing. We have to get in harmony with that energy. So the tool and the healer are the things that put the client or the healee in the right place so that they can receive that healing. And hearing Kimi and others talk about learning to tune into their own innate healing abilities gave me the structure, A, to say, I do have these abilities. I'm already doing this. I can do these things. There's no more doubt, no lack of self-confidence. I can go forward and do this. But also then to find the structure to help me to keep myself healthy so that I knew how to help people intentionally and not just be at the mercy of this thing. So I've discovered that there's three main ways that we receive emotions. One is through others. We absorb them. We without boundaries. We unconsciously agree to take those on, or simply just by being in a chaotic place. We all talk about Black Friday as like murder on an empath soul. It's so stressful, but we can absorb them just simply by being around them. The second is through our own experiences. We experience life, and we have fights, and we have wonderful things, and those create the emotional response in us. And the third is through our ancestors. This is actually through our DNA, because when a person experiences something that is profound enough, especially traumatic enough, it can actually change the structure of our DNA. And that experience, the belief and the feeling becomes imprinted in that. And then it can be passed on through the generations. I have worked with clients where I've seen this happen. And so that really led me to do the work on myself to see what was buried. And there's sort of two categories of ancestral or generational emotions. One are the things that we're really not aware of, and they're maybe not active in the sense that they're not causing continual problems. When those come up in a session, they're really quick and easy to get rid of because it's not something that you've currently brought into your conscious awareness. But the second category is those things that you have really made a part of your life, and you're actively living out these things. So through my healing training, I've learned how to remove those. But the other thing that was completely unexpected and just so wonderful is that the ancestors and loved ones of my clients started showing up in our sessions. And it was a complete shock to me. I never aspired to be a medium. I never wanted to be, but simply by virtue of the fact that I was showing up to do this work, I was asking for spiritual help, and that came in the form of these loved ones who would come through the veil. And they would come, and a lot of times they would just be, when I was first doing this work and I hadn't really developed that mediumship, I just kind of could sense that they were there and was just grateful for the love and support. But then the more that I developed that ability to not really interact with them, but to receive the messages through them, I found that they were specifically talking about a pattern to be healed, an emotion to be healed, or talking about a time that they were there with the client when the client was going through this difficult emotion. And so what I discovered is that even after you die, your work is not done. And this is something that's part of my religious belief, but now I've seen it in my own spiritual work as well. Even after you die, your soul lives on, and your soul is not done developing, and there's still so much more to do. And because we, with our ancestors, share a bloodline, we are still an active link. We're still working through the problems that they began hundreds of years ago, even 50 years ago. If we have this emotion, this pattern in our DNA, and we're living it out now, they are very likely to join us and to help us through, because they want us to succeed just as much as we do. But even then, the most miraculous thing that I've found through this is that when we heal something in ourselves, anyone else in our bloodline who's also affected by this thing will be healed immediately. They don't even have to be consciously aware of it. And so people living, long dead, they're all healed in the same moment that you choose to heal yourself.
I know, and that's so exciting that we can help both through the timeline, both future and past.
Yes.
And, how powerful is that we are able to do that healing work, not just for ourselves, but for our family, our community.
Right. And that's the other thing I learned about when you're going through a hard time, it's very natural to ask, why me? And especially when it's a long struggle that you're dealing with. My years of mental illness, and as a child and a young teenager, when I just couldn't understand it, I thought, I'm doing everything I should be doing. I'm a good girl. I'm following the rules. Why is this happening to me? And it's taken so many years to see all the reasons why, not just that because I'm an empath, because I have these healing abilities, but also when you go through a struggle that your ancestors or family members have also faced, it's not a curse. It's not like you're just being handed this thing because, haha, life sucks. It's an opportunity. And that's what I tell my clients, is that every negative emotion is an opportunity to change. And when these patterns come up again, it's an invitation. It's an invitation for you to say, you know what, I'm not going to do this. It's going to get really tough every time because the weight of the generations and the years is in this pattern. It's like the stakes get higher, but the opportunity is that much greater to heal it once and for all. So just think about that. When you're in this pit and you're asking yourself, why me? Why am I going through this? It's because you're given a gift, because you have this opportunity. You have the intelligence and the perseverance. We have so much knowledge in the world now. We can solve any of our problems with a Google, right? It's all a Google and a click away. So when you're being given these trials, there is a reason, and you are being chosen to help clear yourself and break the pattern and clear all the generations before and after. And as a parent, I love this because it's not just about ones who've gone before. It's that my kids don't have to live the same way that I lived. I can teach them ways to go about life, and I'm also breaking the patterns that I will no longer pass on to them. And that's a really incredible feeling, because parenthood sucks. Parenthood is so hard. And you want to give your kids the best, but it's tough. And so I just feel amazing that even if, I'm going to do the absolute best that I can with my children, but in addition to that, I'm also going to clear all of this garbage, all of this generational stuff, so that they don't have to live with the weight of it on their shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. So how would someone know if it is a generational pattern that they're playing out, or that's coming up to be released?
One of the tools that I use with my clients is muscle testing. And so I can get to their subconscious mind and I can say right away, is this ancestral? I can count how many generations back. Something I've done. Oh, it's been really cool when I've worked with family members, because I'll pull up our joint generational chart. And we'll chart back and we'll see who this belongs to. And it's so cool because it becomes real. You can see these people on a paper as real living people who had the same experiences. And it binds you together as a family, and just really as humanity. You can see that no matter what era people lived in, our feelings are the same. And our responses to life are really so similar.
Yeah. Isn't that true? It's like we're all on this journey to learn, and it's the same. We have all these patterns, or we have these similar experiences that we go through, era after era. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you have a 5-step process that you walk people through. So I would love for you to walk myself and the viewers and listeners through that if we can.
Sure. Yeah. Before we get to that, just a little to preface that, talking about learning, for me, why we have emotions. I always thought I would get to this point to where I've worked through all the bad stuff and I've leveled up and we're good now. We don't have to have them. We're cool. That's not how it works, sadly. One of the reasons for that is that we need the contrast of our negative emotions. You can't know the bitter, or you can't know the sweet until you know the bitter. And so that is a principle, is why our negative emotions are going to keep coming up. It helps us choose, or we say, this bad thing's coming. We need to consciously choose. I don't want that. Let's walk towards something better. And so in that way, our emotions are really a guidance system. And so when we have a positive, we walk toward them. When we have a negative, we walk away. This concept is gaining traction, people are understanding, and it's much easier to go through it that way. When you add the extra layers of, you have to determine, is this your emotion? And if it's not your emotion, is it, someone around you, or is it a deeper ancestral emotion? And so putting all these three things together is how we walk through this process. And it's really, I actually have a cheat sheet that you can print up. It's got spaces. You can journal and figure this out. It's a very introspective, ask yourself questions kind of a process, and you can get that on my website. So the first question, where is this emotion coming from? Very simple. Is this mine? Actually, let's pick one. Is there something in you that you've been wrestling with that you'd like to eliminate?
Well, it must have been because we were doing this interview, right? It's interesting that, and I was going to mention this earlier, but uh, this is the perfect time, where all of these things have been showing up in my clients, people that I work with, people in like the groups that I belong to on Facebook. I'm just seeing this stuff show up, right? Um, and then, so I'm starting to pick up this pattern. And so first I see it in other people. And this is, we'll give this like over a period of 4 or 5 days. And then day after day, I'm getting kind of like this sign or messages of this theme. And so then I went to an event and I found myself feeling like, so I was going to turn to my neighbor and tell them about my show. And I found myself like almost go into this freeze mode and not know what to say. And so then I realized later that what was coming up was like this insecurity, old insecurity. And this was like the theme that I'd been seeing over the last 5 days. So it was interesting how it then came to this crescendo, like where I actually, it came up in my body and I felt it and I had a full on experience with feeling really insecure in this moment. So I think that is what I would like to work on.
Okay, perfect. This feeling of insecurity. And I love that you
Yeah.
walk through how you saw it in everyone else before yourself. A lot of times we can use that as an excuse not to get introspective. We can just say, oh, we have that excuse of, oh, I pick up emotions from other people. And although that's sometimes the case, sometimes it's the case because it's an active vibration in you and it's something coming up to be healed. Okay, so let's walk through this insecurity. So the first question is, where is this emotion coming from? So when I'm working with a client, I do two things. I ask them to sort of get centered, go inward, close your eyes, get into that meditative state so that you can receive your own answers through your own intuition. I can also use muscle testing to check, but the benefit of this process is really you going through your past, going through your mind, and finding all of the ways that this has created a pattern for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have you do that. You'll be our fun guinea pig walking through this so that anyone at home can do this as well. You don't need to have someone walk you through this. So the first, where is this emotion coming from? So is this about the situation you're in currently, or is this something that is reflective of the past? So go ahead.
I think it's like an old theme.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, first thing that comes to your mind, when was the first time that you felt this feeling?
On the playground when I was little and I fell in the mud.
Okay. I remember you talking about this. I remember this episode. This was a good one.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So this first feeling of insecurity when you were a child. Okay. So I want to ask so do you believe this is your emotion or someone else's emotion? Do you believe this originated in yourself or did this originate somewhere else?
Probably somewhere else.
Okay. So then let's take that to the next step. Why does this emotion, this is question number 2, why does this emotion feel so big or urgent or important right now? Do you have an immediate answer with that, or do we need to dig a little further?
Other than it's time to let it go.
Perfect. That's often, no matter how far you dig, the end result is that.
Oh, okay.
It's coming up now because it's time to be healed. You're done with this pattern. So, for those who aren't quite to that spot yet, a couple of other questions to ask yourself, because a lot of times emotions feel really, really big, not because they're urgent, but because they're an emotional pattern or emotional habit. I consider anxiety and depression, at least in my case, to be an emotional habit. It was something that was started years ago, and the neurons and the synapses built this pattern of, oh, this is what depression feels like. And so now anytime I go to that place, they're like, oh yeah, I got this. It's cool. And they run down that, I call it the emotional bobsled track. So it's not necessarily that this emotion is urgent because it's a really big deal. It's because you've trained your body for it to be urgent. And so it immediately goes right back to that place. So for those who struggle with the intense emotions, this is where you can get still, and get introspective and ask yourself, is this big because it's urgent, or is this big because it's a habit? And so getting into that, and again, if you've done the work to see if this is a long ago pattern or if this is a recent one, that'll tell you right away. If this is a long ago pattern, this is just a habit, and my body doesn't need to go to DEFCON 5 to experience this emotion. Okay, so with you, you already know it's coming up now because it's ready to be released. It first originated when you were a child, but it likely goes much further. So that leads perfectly into the third question, which is this emotion about something deeper? So if you were starting from the question of when you were speaking with your friend and trying to talk about your show and the words couldn't come out, that's the immediate thing that we try to feel. Why did I act this way or whatever? You've already gone down deeper and you know this is something that came up when you were a child. So talk about that for a minute. That moment of insecurity, what did that mean for you in that moment?
Which moment? The current moment or the past?
I'm sorry. That moment when you were a child and you fell and you felt that insecurity. Walk me through that moment of insecurity.
So I felt embarrassed
Okay.
because I was all muddy and, I didn't know what to do and I was cold and just uncomfortable and I wanted to hide and not be like a mess.
Right. Okay. So it was about something deeper than just being insecure. It was about being vulnerable and being visible while you're vulnerable. So
Yes.
that again links it back to why you're having problems with or had this problem speaking about your show. It links back to the vulnerability. So as
Mm-hmm.
we see all these emotions, they may feel like one thing, but there's so many layers and they're linked to so many things. So now we have two issues. We have insecurity and we have vulnerability, and sort of a subset of that visibility that goes with vulnerability. So let's see. And you talked about wanting to hide. Do you feel that you have an issue bringing your full self out into the world, being who
Yes.
you are? Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that feeling originated with this instance, with this childhood instance, or do you think that originated somewhere else?
Probably later.
Okay. So what was the first instance that you can connect this feeling to?
Being a latchkey child and needing to be quiet while my stepdad was sleeping because he worked graveyard and so needed to be really quiet and not make noise in the
Okay.
house.
So so there's a dual belief here. There's a belief that you must be quiet, you must not make waves, but the subset of that belief is that when you are quiet, when you do not make waves, you serve others. So you can
Mm-hmm.
see how this has become embedded and how every
Yeah.
time you try to serve others, it's tied into this belief and this feeling of having to hold yourself back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you been aware of that pattern, of that connection before?
In the past, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's follow that one. When
Mm-hmm.
is another time that you have seen that pattern pop up?
Well, going to becoming a counselor, a mental health counselor, because you're trained as a therapist to hold space and you're not to like give advice, you're there to hold space for the client.
Right.
And you're supposed to be this kind of a flat, neutral person.
Right. So that served you well. That
Mm-hmm.
pattern of I'm here to help, but I help by being quiet served you really well there. So why did you not ultimately choose that career?
Well, because I was working as an empath, I was working with large groups of people that were um, suicidal, had dual diagnosis, so they were also addicted to drugs or alcohol. And so I found my energy being really drained, and I wasn't able to have good emotional boundaries to
Right.
protect my energy.
Right. And that one thing, the image as you were talking about that, the image of you in this room with all these people of just wanting to go into a closet and just wanting, and that immediately connected back to that initial, you were covered in mud and you wanted to hide.
Yeah.
So you can see how tracing this one instance of feeling insecure, we got back to the origin, which sprung here and all these and we could do this all day. All of
Mm-hmm.
our emotional story It's all connected. It may not be connected to one origin every time. In fact, it won't be. But we can see how, if you can go back far enough to the origin, how many different things that have sprung from this one, spring, they can all be cleared up when you heal that origin. So you can see how, when you go back even further to the ancestral patterns and the generational patterns, how many other things and people that can be healed by clearing up this one event.
Right.
So let's go then to number 4, which is, what does this emotion want me to do? And I ask that because I really feel that emotions are sentient in a lot of ways. They have their own story. They're certainly coming to bring us a message. And not only have we sort of created a space for them, we've made it nice and cozy for them to live and live out their pattern in our lives, but they're coming because they want us to do something. And so that's the next introspective pattern. Again, it gets back to the urgency. Do I have to act now? Is this an intense emotion because I'm in danger and I need to move? Or is this something more that's long-standing that I need to make changes? The 2 subsets of this question, what does this emotion want me to do? They really fork in 2 ways. Do I need to change my actions, or do I need to change my beliefs? Were you acting in a way that made you insecure? Were you being dangerous? Were you being foolish in any way? Or was it triggering this belief? This belief of, well, we've already talked through that in you. It triggered this belief that in order to help someone, you have to stay silent, right? Mm-hmm. So what in this instance do you feel that the one emotion of insecurity wants you to do right now?
Besides let it go?
Besides let it go.
Because I know that that's always the end,
right.
the end goal. Okay, ask me again.
What does this emotion want you to do right now?
It wants to feel safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it
how
wants me to protect it.
Yes. So what aspect of yourself is it asking you to protect? Because you can't protect all of yourself. If you do, you won't progress in other ways. What aspect of yourself needs protecting right now?
What aspect? I don't know. It's around vulnerability. So
around vulnerability. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So an image came to mind, and check in with yourself and see how this feels. Is there something in your heart that needs to be protected?
Possibly. Yeah, I mean, usually I feel it solar plexus heart region. It's kind of like.
Okay. So that tells me that there is also something there that this emotion has chosen to stay, because if this feeling of insecurity can cause you to back out of this aspect of life and bow out of this, it's protecting you. So this emotion is not going to go away because it's protecting something deeper. And that is why it's asking you it's asking you to protect yourself. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a minute, and we're going to do a little quick meditation. And I'm going to have you look inside to where, going back through your eyes, through your mind, and travel down into your heart space. I'm going to ask you to notice your heart. Tell me how it looks, how it's functioning. Tell me what you notice about your heart.
It's really nice and red.
Okay.
Seems like there is a really thin kind of veil surrounding it.
Okay. So this thin veil, what is it made out of? First answer that comes to mind.
Kind of like, what comes to mind is gossamer, but that seems too thin. So it's a little bit thicker than that.
Okay. So is this film in your heart? I'm going to ask you first answer yes or no. Is this a pattern?
No.
Okay. Is this film protecting a pattern?
Yes.
Okay. First thing comes to your mind, do you know what this pattern is?
No.
Okay. Is this pattern yes or no? Is this a generational pattern?
No.
Okay. So let's go then to our next question. And this is the final question. It's sort of two-pronged. First being, can I release this emotion? And the second is, what can I do to release it? So ask yourself first, can you release this pattern and this emotion of insecurity?
Yes.
Can you release it now, or do you need to do more work?
I'm scared to.
scared too. Okay. Okay.
I'm sure I could release it, but I'm.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. You can open your eyes for a minute.
Okay.
So what does the fear trigger in you?
I think it's around being seen.
Okay. So that fear
Well,
of
with
being,
vulnerability. Let me back that up. Because clearly I have a show and I'm seen every week. So it's
so
not
you're
that.
already
It's
being seen, right?
right, but it's like there's a really I have a real strong protection or fear around the vulnerability piece
Okay.
and not being in control or something around that.
Right. Okay. So what I can see is that this pattern of insecurity, the reason it's still here is it's what's protecting the vulnerability. Because if the insecurity goes, this is now a target.
Yeah.
So you want to get rid of that insecurity, but it's the vulnerability that's the real problem, which, by the way, is another reason we have our negative emotions, because there sometimes is a payoff, and it's a real benefit to us to keep this emotion. So let's leave the insecurity for a moment, and we'll talk about this vulnerability. And we'll see. I'll ask you to close your eyes again, since you were doing so wonderful at this intuitive. You don't even need a muscle test. Your intuition is spot on. So let's check in with this feeling of vulnerability. Is this vulnerability your pattern or someone else's?
My pattern.
Okay. Did this begin with the incident of falling in the mud?
No.
Did it begin before then?
No.
Did it occur at the same incident between the ages of 10 and 15?
No.
Okay. Did it occur between 5 and 10?
No.
Did it occur between 15 and 20?
Must have.
Okay. I'm getting that this is tied into a relationship, to a key romantic relationship. Is that what came up for you?
I didn't have anything specific.
Okay. That's what
I just felt like there's something there.
There's something there. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
ask yourself, does this have to do with a romantic relationship?
Not sure.
Okay. All right. So we have this level of insecurity between 10 and 15, and we have this vulnerability between 15 and 20. We know that these two are linked, and we know that insecurity doesn't want to go because it's protecting this vulnerability. So we can ask yourself, is your body ready to release this feeling of vulnerability?
Yes.
Okay. If you release this vulnerability, will it release your insecurity?
Not sure.
Yeah, I'm getting the fear. These two are kind of like, they're little twins, and they have found a lot of purpose in sticking together and bonding together. They work together to protect you. I'm getting that sense that sort of one without the other is kind of lost. And so that's why they're connected. So let's just focus on the vulnerability, because the insecurity is being a little stubborn. So let's focus on this vulnerability issue. And I'm going to have you ask yourself, do we need to know more about this feeling of vulnerability?
No.
Okay. Can we release this feeling of vulnerability?
Yes.
Okay. So now I want you to ask yourself, what does your body want you to do to release the vulnerability?
Let go.
Let go of what?
Holding on to fear.
So this feeling of vulnerability, in protecting your vulnerability, it's allowed you to let fear make your decisions. Is that right? It's given you an excuse to hide behind.
Yeah, when I feel really vulnerable. Mm-hmm.
So I want you to ask yourself, if you let go of these feelings, is your body and your spirit ready to go to the next level?
Yes.
Oh, that was so immediate. That's wonderful. Okay. You're ready. You're ready.
Yeah.
Now, there are lots of ways you can open your eyes if you'd like. There are lots of ways to release emotions. You can get, I know you've had an emotion code practitioner, which is something that I use. But again, healing isn't really about the tool. Healing is about getting ourselves in touch with the truth of our emotion and the message it's bringing. And so just kind of to recap here, the message of these emotions, we pulled up several instances, we pulled up several different emotions. They're all related back to the same feeling, particularly that you have the benefit, you have the ability to help others, but you must be silent at the same time. Your body is telling you now that you're ready, you've outgrown this pattern, you're ready to release it. But the reason that you've held on to it is because that's sort of been your excuse, your reason to hide. It's allowed you this this comfortable, cozy, safe place away from, that empath part of you that you feel it would absorb too much if you got rid of this. So you can see all these different things that are tied together. And it comes down to this one point. You're so ready to release the vulnerability. You're ready, and it's time. So I want you to ask yourself, what does your body want you to do to release vulnerability? Is there anything that comes to mind? Nothing immediately.
Jogging. I mean, I guess movement comes to mind, but nothing is just really obvious.
Cool. Well, I always ask that because a lot of times there will be something obvious, but other times it will be more categorical, like you said, where it's movement, whether it's introspection, whether it's love. And so just taking the cue from that initial feeling. And I have some things listed on this free cheat sheet to help you walk through it, because each emotion, as we know, has its own vibration and resonance. And so the method we use to remove or invite this emotion to leave, it needs to match the resonance of this emotion. The movement that you got for yourself, it made me think of that harsh, the jogging, the fast, powerful movement that really has more to do with your fear, which is great too, because fear and vulnerability, they're like best friends, and they're hanging out, having a party. So that fast, aggressive movement is really you taking the reins of that fear. You're matching that vibration, and you say, I got this. I'm in control of this. I can ramp up my intensity. I can lower my intensity. And it puts you in control of that fear physiologically, if that makes sense. So the vulnerability aspect might be something more softer that you'll want to do and spend a lot of time. You talked about your heart being very soft, being very bright red, and that film, that protective film, that film is not necessarily a bad thing. That film is a good thing, and we all have these beneficial protective ways. And so when you invite an emotion to leave and you're sort of asking it what it wants, you're meeting it on its vibration, you're allowing your body to keep those the beneficial protective measures in place, not the excuse, hiding back from life measures in place. And so we've talked about the fear. I want you to ask yourself if there's something you can do to honor that vulnerability.
Yes, buy myself some flowers.
I love it. Perfect. Yes. It's that self-love that you deserve it, that this is your time. And it's showing, so many times because we're so used to getting our emotions from other people, both our negative and our positive, we leave it up to others to send all of our emotions our way. And we forget that we can generate our own, and we can write our own emotional story. So honoring yourself with self-care of movement and exercise, giving yourself love, these are beautiful ways to come from all aspects, from all angles of these emotional aspects, to really honor all the different things that we've pulled up. So I want you to close your eyes again and check in with your heart, and let's just see if anything has changed. Does it look any different inside?
Yeah, it feels more expanded, larger.
Beautiful. Perfect. Okay. Anything else you notice?
Yeah, I think it feels happier.
Good.
Just more expansive, but like it has space.
Perfect. Now, while we're still in that heart space, I want to ask, is there anything you can do to ease your transition into this next phase? Because when we let go of these really big emotions, we're leveling up and we're about to receive a lot more. With that invites more ego fears. And so I want to preempt that a little bit and have you ask yourself what you can do to ease into this next big level up.
Make sure I have enough empty space, quiet time, where I am not doing something in particular.
Perfect.
Take Epsom salt baths, drink water. So self-care, yeah.
Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, you can open your eyes. You are an A student, my dear.
Thank you.
You've been a lot, I can tell. And I don't want to scare people off from thinking, if they're not that in tune with their intuition, I don't want to scare them off from thinking that they can't go through this exercise. You were able to
Right.
pull up really specific things, and that's fantastic. If you're not, it's okay. I don't want people to think that because they didn't know the specific thing that this didn't work for them. They're already
Right.
beginning to peel the layers. And the more that they do things like this to get into that space of letting your body speak to you and your mind and your memories speak to you, the more they're going to come up. When I began this journey, in fact, I bought a book to help me know what intuition was and how to use it. I was so clueless. I had no idea because I was so clouded by these fear emotions and all these things. And so by simply having the intention of wanting to speak to my body, speak to my spirit, to speak to God, and to hear. It wasn't necessarily about speaking, it was about hearing and receiving. The more that we do these introspective things, it switches on our own intuition, and we'll find ways that really speak to us. Some people will see images, they'll have memories, some will physically feel sensations or emotions, and some might have words pop into their mouth or the answer or into their mind, or answers just appear. That's sort of my knowing style, is claircognizance, that just sort of the answer appears. And so I want to invite you listeners that when you go through these types of exercises, allow yourself to be open to whatever comes up. Don't think that it has to look a certain way or feel a certain way. Let your body speak to you in whatever way it wants to, because our emotions have an entire story and they want to be heard and understood. But you have to just get yourself into that position where you can listen non-judgmentally and be open to whatever they have to tell you and whatever they want you to do.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah, I was not always able to come up with my answers that quickly. I mean, rewind 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I couldn't even tell you how I felt. And I would pop into my head, and I felt like this strong disconnect between my head and my body. And so I would have people ask me, well, how do you feel? And I would feel like all just tingly, and I would be like, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's really important that like Lindsay said, if you are feeling like, don't let my experience make you feel like you're not doing it right, because going through this process, it is about getting out of your head, because that's where we try to think the answer, and that's not really the answer that we want to find here. We want to drop into our body and allow our body to kind of give us those really subtle cues. And it's just practicing feeling, dropping in, and that in itself can be really an anxiety provoking experience, dropping in. And because in our head we can feel safe and in control and figure things out, but yeah, we want to really drop in. So
and in fact, our emotions are not here. Our emotions and our memories are all throughout our bodies. And that's been studied, where they've hooked people up to electrodes and they've asked them to remember things. There's memories in our feet, in our liver, and they're all over our bodies. So you're absolutely right. When we spend too much time here, in fact, I used to spend too much time here. I wasn't even in my body. My energy was like escaping, and it's way down the road, and I had to learn to bring it back slowly. I had horrible headaches, by the way, when I was when I would start bringing it in, because I was so used to just being empty of my own consciousness that bringing it back in took a lot of effort. And in particular, if you suffered a trauma or emotions that are traumatic, like betrayal and things like that, that's another excuse. That's a bad word, but that's another reason that your energy is going to want to try to escape, and that you're going to be sort of running away from your experience. So it can take a while to consciously bring your energy back in, and you have to make that safe space for it. Self-care is huge in making that space. You are literally telling your body, I will take care of you. I will treat you safe. And you're telling your energy and your feelings and your soul that it's okay to come back. It's okay to come home. I will take care of you. And creating that was something that was lost on me in my recovery process, is I didn't understand the aspect of self-care. Doctors just told me take meds and get lots of sleep, and that was the end of it. So I had to learn to treat myself as this integrative being, where there's these emotions that I have to manage, but I have a soul, I have a spirit. My body needs better food. My body needs all kinds of things, and creating that safe place for my spirit and soul to live really allowed that integration to come back. And that did turn my intuition on. Once I was fully present inside my body, these other psychic senses that I had just really turned on. And I'm I like keep expecting something new to open up. The way that it just evolves, the more that you start with the intention to just understand who you are, why you're here, what your challenges have to teach you, you're going to start finding those purposes. And I love that you said it all comes with getting inside yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, it all begins. It begins with getting inside yourself.
Yeah. And then the fun can begin.
Yes.
As all this stuff opens up and unfolds, and we keep expanding our energy field and kind of growing into the best version of ourselves. I mean, it's infinite. It's limitless how big we can grow. And so, yeah, right. That's exciting.
Right. And I keep telling myself, like I said, I expect these new abilities to pop up. It's not that I'm necessarily pursuing them, but it's just uncanny. The more I allow myself to, well, first to be open to the possibility that I could be a medium or that I could tune into future events and things like that. It's just been so delightful to find out that just purely your intention and your presence and allowing that opens those up. I mean, it's funny now. I keep joking about the synchronicities that I'm having right now. I think are priming me for that precognizance and that precognition, because it's like I'll hear, and they're so little, they're so silly. They're like, I'll hear a song, and then someone will sing the song, and then the song will pop into my head, and then I'll see it in a movie, and like all these things. It's again like those breadcrumbs just being dropped. Yeah. Your body wants, or not your body, your soul wants to evolve, and your spirit wants to evolve. It's our fear of evolution that's keeping us from these gifts, or these, not even psychic gifts. I don't want to limit it to that, but this soul expansion. But allowing yourself to follow the breadcrumbs. And this emotional exercise we did is like the biggest follow the breadcrumbs. I mean, look how many different places and times in your life we went through. And it all started with this desire, insecurity. What's this all about? Let's peel back the layers and figure out what's going on here.
Yep. And here we are, we're back at vulnerability. And I think that's such a human experience we all have something that we feel vulnerable about. So I'm grateful that you helped guide me to get to that place, because I think that it's so powerful for us all to recognize that we all have this experience. So,
yeah.
So, oh my gosh, Lindsay, this was such a powerful conversation, and people are going to be, I know people are going to love it and really resonate with your story and, this conversation and my vulnerabilities. So, so yeah, I mean, if you guys, we would love to hear your experience with this conversation. Was there anything that popped up for you? Did you go through the process and have a particular experience? We please share it. Yeah, join us in the Awakened Goddess community and let us know. So thank you again, Lindsay. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. I hope you enjoyed today's guest and got something you can start using in your life right away. For more spiritual insights and to listen to more episodes, subscribe to The Awakened Goddess Show at theawakenedgoddess.com and discover wisdom that'll change your life.